Okay, well, I think I'm ready. What would you like to talk about today?
Okay, I would have, pretty much 3 questions.
All right.
And those are all questions never been asked before, as far as I know.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Uh-huh. So I would have one personal question to you, one medical question, and then sort of, maybe you could give advice for a question, regarding students. Okay, well, how do you want to start? Personal question or medical question?
Whatever you'd like.
Okay, okay. Okay. Let's start with the personal question, and this might be a little bit of a sensitive subject, Dr. McDougall.
All right.
You have to tell me.
Let's see. I always reserve the right to refuse to answer.
Absolutely. Dr. McDougall, I heard that you, when you still lived in Santa Rosa, that you had an extensive sort of private library in your house.
I did. Yeah, I had, during my residency, at Queens Medical Center, the Queens Medical Center in Honolulu.
Uh-huh.
I had a lot of, I worked hard, used to work 30-hour shifts, but I had some free time, and the Hawaii Medical Library used to be right on the grounds of the Queens Medical Center. So what I would do is I'd go over during my free time, and believe me, it was an obsession, because I would find this research that everybody had ignored. And it wasn't that it wasn't important research, it was just it wasn't profitable research. Mm-hmm. And back then we used something called the Medicus Index, which was a group of books. I know nowadays you just look it up on Google or the National Library of Medicine, but you had these shelves of books. You look up like diet and then and heart disease. And so you cross-reference in these pages. And then I would go look up in the journals, the various articles. And because they charged me 10 cents a copy at the library, I used to take a hand truck and boxes of books from the library over to the medical center where I had free copying privilege. And I got to remember, this was over 40 years ago. And I would, in fact, you can still see places on the library steps where I took chunks out of the steps when the truck hit. Where it wasn't supposed to. Anyway, I would go over there in the evening and I would copy all these articles. And they would date back as far as 100 years ago, but most of them were current. This was in the 1980s. Let's see, it was actually in the late 70s, early 80s. Back before industry had contaminated the research as thoroughly as they have these days. You really can't trust anything since about 1980 unless you've thoroughly investigated the financial supporters and the vested interests. Plain and simple, industry discovered that the best way to advertise is by publishing fake news in the medical journals, fake research. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so I collected all of these articles, and I had file cabinets full, which I carried from Hawaii to California where I lived, and I had in my basement these file cabinets stocked with papers. And many of these papers are PDF, I put into a PDF format, copied before I lost them all, which I did in the October 2017 wildfires of Santa Rosa, California. But I was fortunate enough to take some of my favorite papers and to copy them and to put them up on the internet. And people who take any of our courses,
I got them, yes.
Yeah, they get those papers. Otherwise, I mean, you could probably find them, but you'd spend your life looking for them.
Uh-huh.
And they'd be in some national library someplace. Mm-hmm. But there were papers published in the 20s, in the 30s, in the 40s, in the 50s. And yeah, I had quite an extensive library. I was never much of a reader. Myself. In other words, I didn't like to read for pleasure. I do nowadays, but when I discovered scientific research, it was something I really enjoyed reading. And to this day, I mean, there's a medical letter over there on the table, and 2 or 3 medical journals on another table. I mean, I just still read research. I find it fascinating. And I think part of the reason is the power structure of medicine. Your position in medicine is based upon your knowledge. if you happen to be in real estate, it's based upon the amount of land you own. If you're a banker, it's the amount of money that you can collect. Well, as a doctor, it's the amount of knowledge that you play as your it's not a good word, but as your trump card. So anyway, what you do is you play this card, and here I discovered all of this information on nutrition, diet. And of course, no one knew about diet, and still don't. I mean, very few doctors and dietitians know anything meaningful about diet or diet therapy. Well, if what you know happens to make you the expert, I became the world expert on nutrition almost overnight, just by default, because nobody else knew anything about it. And from that point on, I just studied and studied and studied. A lot was written. And there are a lot of famous researchers before research was so heavily contaminated by industry's money. There was a lot of good research done back in the early 1900s and the mid 1900s. So the basic stuff, like what causes diabetes and what causes atherosclerosis. I mean, all the basic research was done back then. Sometimes I'll get in meetings with where we'll discuss what needs to be done to get the world reoriented towards the truth. And someone will bring up the idea that, well, what we need is we need more research done. We don't need more research done. We have all the research done we could possibly ever use. What we have to do is we have to take and accept that research. It's just like, for example, a cigarette smoker. They don't believe the research that says that cigarettes cause lung cancer. It's overwhelming for us non-smokers, but it's the same thing with the diet. There's plenty of information. I mean, I could fill a large library with the information on diet and health, and I would only fill a small library with the information on smoking and health. So the information is there. We just have to be in a position to accept it. The problem is when the smoking epidemic reached its height in the 50s, half the population smoked. But that meant the other half could see the problem. They were still sane. When it comes to food worldwide, 99.999% of the people eat the same, well, that's not true. It's probably about 97% of the people eat the same rich Western diet. So they can't see over their dinner plates. So anyway, it's still in that situation. It's sad to say, when I discovered all this back in, I would say I was pretty well founded in the research and my understanding of the way I've practiced the last half century. By 1977, I thought, in fact, I even went and told my chief of medicine, I thought that people would be lining up from my office door to the Honolulu International Airport waiting to get in to see me. Because I've discovered how to cure the diseases in over 80% of the cases just by fixing the food. Well, to this date, that line has never formed. Other doctors, there are thousands of doctors out there that have emulated my form of practice. And they found it also difficult to get patients interested in diet therapy, although diet therapy is the only thing that works because these are dietarily caused diseases. It's from the food that people are fat, sick, diabetic, atherosclerosis, arthritis, etc. So anyway, that's a longer answer than you expected.
No, that's wonderful, and there's so much to dive into what you just said. So the library you had in your basement, did I understand that right? When you do the TSCC course, we got around 200 to 300 papers in PDF format. If 200 to 300, I counted them once. I got 280 or something if I have it right.
But those are my favorite articles.
Those were the favorite ones.
Yes.
Well, that's good.
Those
to have them. Thank you for sharing.
There was so much lost, like early research showing the association between lymphomas and, say, breast cancer. There was a one-to-one correlation back in the 1960s and 70s when they did research. The problem with doing research today is because of the worldwide news and the fact that everybody wants to emulate the American lifestyle and diet. You don't have the differences in cultures that you used to have, particularly in the eating patterns. Whereas you could pretty much count on Asians up until 1980 eating a diet that was 90% rice in a good share of Asia. Since the 1980s, there's been a large segment of the population in Asia that's converted to the Western diet. And you can see it. I mean, diabetes has gone from virtually none in 1980 in China and before, essentially no type 2 diabetes, to a situation where the last report I read, which was in 2013, it showed that 12% of the Chinese were frankly diabetic and half were pre-diabetic. And it's worse now. I mean, there have been further studies on the Chinese population that shows how it's really the youth, you know, the people who are in their 20s and 30s and 40s that have made this kind of change and have made so many people diabetic. And you can imagine there are a whole bunch of older people that still stay with the traditional diet. Wait till they're gone. Then you're going to be looking at statistics where, you know, maybe 30, 40% of the population is truly diabetic. And nearly all of them are pre-diabetic. That's what the Western diet does for you.
So to the basement again. So if I imagine it right, there were cabinets filled with files. That's how it looked.
Steel file cabinets, right? Yeah, and there are a lot of memorabilia. I had.
Could you go into something we never heard? Maybe something, if that's possible, like, you know, papers with stories attached, how you found, I don't know, just anything.
You know, all I can tell you is that it's a good share of my life is in those files. But in terms of, but I also, you know, it's one of those things where you look back and you say, well, I remember I had that. I know exactly where it is or was. House, but the house is gone. You know, my shows on Donahue and Larry King and different things like that are all gone. But I was able to take some of the more important radio shows that I did and I put them up on our website. So I was far enough thinking ahead that I didn't lose everything. But there are some interviews, like I only have one of Dr. Atkins. I did several of him on my show. I think I've got Carl Lewis up there, you know, the world-class runner. He's up on the website as far as the radio interview goes that I did. Carl Lewis was my patient, so to speak. And anyway, I lost a lot of that type of content. It really doesn't trouble me a lot.
Okay, I'm glad. I'm sorry I asked, but this is, you know.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things where it's been over 2 years now. And, you know, Mary and I, we deal with it like the other 5,000 households in our neighborhood that lost things. And it hasn't been easy for anybody. But, you know, that's a small problem compared to, and it was kind of interesting after we lost everything in the fire. And we did lose everything. I mean, I got my tennis shoes, and my computer, and my pajamas, and that's all. You know, I could have taken a very despondent attitude about everything, and instead I said, you know, you just got to get on with it. And I, you know, took the phrase as a philosophy, and that is that how many people get to start their life again at age 70? And I got to start everything again at age 70. Anyway. And the other thing is and I'm very sincere about this, every day I get at least 2 or 3 emails from people who have problems that are much, much greater than the small losses we had in terms of our material possessions in the wildfires. I mean, I can tell you, there are very few people I trade places with. So we aren't really that damaged. We just lost material things. And I lost, you know, as if anybody would ever care about my memorabilia. You know. Anyway, that's. I really do feel like I've, you know, kind of started a new life. As you know, I've kind of left my parade, the parade I was leading in terms of changing the way people practice medicine, thought about nutrition. That's been taken over by literally thousands of other doctors, even though they don't they're not in an active practice like they should be. They know, they at least know. I mean, the American College of Lifestyle Medicine has 3,500 doctors in it, or professionals or members. They're not all doctors, physicians. But, pretty much all of them know about diet therapy, and the diet causes most of our diseases. As far as turning that into an actual practice, very few of them do. We do, of course, at our clinic in Santa Rosa, California. I've been doing this for, oh man, I'll tell you, it's probably been about 35 years I've been running live-in programs. Taking care of over 7,000 people in a live-in situation, and probably close to over 10,000, maybe 12,000 people altogether. Mm-hmm. That is a lucky doctor to have had the chance to interact with that many people and to try and help them. I've had a blessed career, let me tell you.
I can imagine, yes. Wonderful. Dr. McDougall, you mentioned many times that the important research in nutrition was done before the 1980s, yes, right? Before the 1980s?
Pretty much. It's about 1980 that industry discovered the best way to advertise was in the center of the journals. Mm-hmm. I used to think how stupid it was that the Journal of the American Medical Association and the New England Journal of Medicine would take and put hundreds of thousands of dollars in these 4-color ads that were in the front and at the end of the journal. And I thought, how stupid they are. Nobody reads these 4-color ads. And it took me a while to figure out the ads were in the middle. They're the research papers. It's not the colored ones in the beginning and end. So about 70% of the research is funded by industry with the results already predetermined.
May I ask, the 70%, I heard you saying that before, is that your estimation? Or
it actually comes from PLOS, Public Library of Science. It's from the Public Library of Science journals. You'll find that 70% of the nutrition research is tied to industry. And it's easy to find that in terms of drug research. That data.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then I guess I go to the medical question, if that's okay. All right, and Dr. McDougall, you have to hold your horses and hear me out, please, on this one. Because as soon as I start, you might think this guy completely lost it. Did he not understand anything? But give me 30 seconds to explain, and then you'll see what I'm heading at, please. Okay, so the ketogenic diet, right? Yeah. We know, right? It's, we should never advertise this as a weight loss program or anything like that. Why would you do that? A diet that rottens your arteries. But there's one little thing I would like to have more clarity about. I'm a student in nutrition, right? So the ketogenic diet medically is often mentioned because of the background with children who had seizures, right?
Right. Yeah.
You wrote a newsletter, 2003 September. I saw it.
Probably, yeah. I wrote about it, about the Atkins diet being used in children for seizures. But I also included a paragraph about how concerned doctors were about feeding such a diet to young people in terms of atherosclerosis, constipation, and many other problems that the kids were having. Yeah. And this is not a healthy diet. But it has helped people who, young people who've had seizures, put them on a ketogenic diet. It's a difficult thing to do for a kid.
So my question would be this. Obviously not for the general population, that's clear. Nobody would ever, But so when you have a mother coming in your practice with her child, right, having seizures on a regular basis, medication not working to a satisfying degree,
right?
Is the ketogen in this medical special setting something like a tool that a doctor should be aware of, or should we completely wipe it off the table?
I think that definitely this is something that would be reserved for a very small number of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if so, would we at least alter it to a ketogenic diet with no animal foods, like the fat coming from plant foods?
You could, if that was your goal, but you're dealing with some pretty sick kids. So what you're trying to do is stop the seizures. And considering what I went through as a child in terms of food, I have no doubt that this child will survive for a 2 or 3 year period of time on the ketogenic diet. I mean, the human body is tough.
Okay.
But this would be a therapeutic tool.
Yeah.
Not be misinterpreted as credit for the use of the ketogenic diet for the general population or kids in general. And this is a very dangerous diet. And the people who promote it are misinformed. I don't know what their intentions are, but from all points of view, you look at all religions teach that animal products should be reserved for special occasions or feasts, and the animal rights issue certainly ought to be something of concern of modern people. Good grief, you watch the fires in Australia right now, and they talk about the extinction of the koala bears. Not that they eat koala bears in Australia, but human beings would eat koala bears, I'm sure. So, it's wrong from that point of view, too. And probably the most concerning, unquestionably the most concerning thing to me is that these ketogenic diets promote a planetary extinction type of eating. And that's wrong. Even if they were healthy, which they're not. I mean, Atkins' own research shows that 70% of people are constipated, with almost as many having severe halitosis. And of course, he had horrible atherosclerosis when he died, Atkins did, which, by the way, I lost his autopsy report from the fires, which his wife provided after he died. And he went on Larry King and said he didn't have any artery disease. Guess he didn't tell the truth. But anyway, his wife, Veronica Atkins, released his angiograms after he died, and they were full of atherosclerosis. And I had a copy of them. I don't know whether they're obtainable anymore, but they're dangerous diets. For every species on the planet, and for every individual human being, they're not right, except something as isolated as uncontrollable seizures in little kids.
Would that be the only therapeutic niche you know of, or is there something else?
The other thing you could look at is, what were they called? They were the Ansel Keys meals, K rations. They're very compressed rations that are taken by soldiers out in the field. And one of the goals of this food is to not leave any residue, so that the soldiers can travel around and they're constipated,
really?
Trails, for the enemy to follow. So I guess that would be another indication. If you wanted your soldiers to be constipated, you would put them on the MREs, I think they were called, meals for, I don't know. Anyway, they're a special meal pack for soldiers. High density, high energy, low poop.
I got it. Well, okay. Okay, thanks for the information. So that's good. So, as a therapeutic measurement, I guess we have to keep it in the back of our heads. Yeah.
Only in that circumstance.
Yes, absolutely.
The other indications, which is it cures diabetes. Well, any weight loss program does. You could put something on chemotherapy and you cure diabetes, which, by the way, I had an article published in Mayo Proceedings back comparing the Atkins diet, the high protein, high fat, low carb diets to cancer chemotherapy, because they had an article in Mayo Clinics. They had an article about promoting a low carb, high fat, high protein diet, an Atkins type diet. And what this article referred to is the fact that people who went on this diet not only lost weight, but their cholesterols came down, their blood pressures came down, etc. And I wrote a letter to the editor, which was published, you can find it, which says essentially this is equivalent to making a person lower their cholesterol, lose weight, lower their blood pressure by putting them on cancer chemotherapy. In other words, you make them so sick by both approaches that they can't eat, and their cholesterols come down, their blood pressures come down, etc. So yeah, I mean, there are lots of ways to lose weight. So I guess you could say the ketogenic diet is an effective way to lose weight. So is chemotherapy. It's not a healthy thing to do. So there are very limited situations where I would say that anybody should consider an acceptable way The seizure issue would be, again, it's a 1 in a million thing. Extremely rare.
Okay. All right. Thank you for clarifying that. That's really helpful for students, who hear about this and they wonder, is it really something in these cases,
Our students need to get it right.
Yeah, no. I do not want to put it out of context. No way.
I don't know whether you had a chance to listen. I told you I got the Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Lifestyle.
Congratulations.
Oh, thanks. Anyway, I gave this presentation and
I saw it. Yeah.
And you saw it. Okay. Well,
of course.
I challenged my colleagues to take a more active role in diet and planetary salvation. And I explained to them, this is a meeting where 1,000 people attended, 500 attended my dinner, which was sold out. And, I explained to them, I said, the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, you guys don't know how to build Teslas. You don't know how to put solar panels up on top of buildings. I said, what you know about is food. And, the research says we should be able to cut the carbon dioxide emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions. You can look at it from both ways. By somewhere around 60, 70, 80% from agriculture. And agriculture represents as much as half of the greenhouse gas production on this planet. So I suppose I may be doing the math wrong. Somebody can correct me. But if you measure 50% by 70%, you got a 35% reduction in greenhouse gases overall by changing everybody on the planet to a vegan diet. Now, I suggested that to somebody very important in the world of climate and diet. And he's a very frustrated gentleman, very, very important person in this movement. And he said, well, you just can't talk about diet and climate. And they don't. I mean, the Republicans never mentioned climate change during their pre-presidential campaigns back in 2004, 2008. 2012, they mentioned climate change a little bit, not diet. And here, let's see, 2016, probably not. For the 2020 elections, the Democrats, Cory Booker is a vegan, but he doesn't think everybody should eat a vegan diet. And Andrew Yang, he knows that diet is destroying the planet, the high livestock diet, but you can't expect everybody to change. And Jay Inslee, the governor of Washington, whose full focus is on climate change, doesn't even mention diet. Now remember, what we eat, in other words, the livestock industry, not just plants, but the livestock industry, estimates are as high as over 51% by conservative figures of the greenhouse gas production is from livestock. And changing from the typical Western diet to a healthy starch-based vegan diet, I believe will reduce the reduction of greenhouse gases tremendously and give us a chance. But nobody's talking about it. Anyway, I think the point I was getting to is when he presented this to another group of very wise people, and he asked, why will nobody talk about diet and the climate when there's such a huge impact from the meat and the dairy industry? And he said, well, it's just too sensitive a subject. It's too politically sensitive. He said, well, when are we going to talk about it? And the guy came back and said, well, when there are only 1 billion people left on planet Earth, then maybe we'll start talking about it. It's a shame. We are the people left on this planet in the next 50 years will all be vegans, probably in the next 10, either by choice or by circumstance. No, I mean, the world is changing. And anybody who isn't watching what's going on is, unfortunately, maybe they have more peace of mind than I have, but they're deluding themselves. There's an emergency out there that is possibly uncontrollable. But being a grandfather of 7, I can't quit. So I'm working with this group trying to get things done, trying to get some change.
That's good to hear. Wonderful. Okay, so then I said after these two questions, I would have something else like seeking advice for students. Now, let's see. Hypothetically, let's say we have a student or several that go into the field of nutrition or medicine and already knowing what you teach for decades, right?
Right.
By the way, people can look everything up on drmcdougall.com. That is drmcdougall.com. And I encourage people also to look at the McDougall discussion board. You know, you provide many articles over the years, but also in the discussion board, there is your dietitian, Jeffrey Novick, and he runs an entire forum, the Jeff Novick forum. Also in there, you find invaluable amounts of knowledge. So they should check out the website.
You know, people will say, some of my colleagues, and I'm always really honored when they say that, is they say, you know, before I do anything else, I go to McDougall's site and use the search engine to find out what he says about it. Then I go to the National Library of Medicine, and everything seems to be more in context. Because you know, I have a way of writing and communicating where I can take some very complex issues and make them simple. To me, I live by a statement that the truth is simple and easy to understand. So if somebody's giving you some complex theory that is way over your head, the first thing you ought to be thinking, instead of how stupid you are, is how little they are in command of their subject. Because if you're in command of your subject, you can make anyone understand. So, but as I say that, I kind of laughed. One of my mentors, Henry Heimlich, who was a good friend before he died, he was one of my most important mentors. He would tell me a couple of things. One, he says, John, you'll have to run around them because they'll never give you a platform. In other words, discussing my colleagues and my ideas, because I used to try and work through the medical profession. You know, try and explain to the cardiologists, the diabetologists, and so on, that they're missing this whole segment of cause and cure called food. And, you know, they would never give me a platform. And so I started doing things like infomercials and writing national best-selling books and doing webinars. So I ran around them. And to this date, I'm basically running around my colleagues. And the other thing he told me, Henry Heimlich, he says, if your colleagues understand what you're saying, you're not being creative enough. I really didn't understand that until I got to the point of climate change. I mean, yes, they didn't understand the diet, but now they do. You know, pretty much every doctor worldwide at least knows that diet's important. Some really understand the implications like I do, but very few. So it took about half a century from my discovery, which was not original. I mean, Nathan Pritikin knew it before me, Walter Kempner, you know, many people knew it before me. I didn't originally discover it. But it took 50 years for me to get into a position where I was not speaking in terms that my colleague couldn't understand. So now I'm on to climate change and diet. So I guess I'm being creative enough because my colleagues don't understand. So Henry Heimlich would be pleased that about my creative. I'm not pleased because they, you know, everybody needs to understand the implications of what's going on. I don't know. I don't know. To be quite frank with you, remember I told you the story a few minutes ago about how I thought there'd be a whole line all the way from my office to the road. Well, that never appeared in 50 years. And I sit here thinking that I'm going to help save the world for my 7 grandkids. You know, maybe a little part. You know, it's. I hate to be realistic, but you never know. I mean, when my good friend says planet Earth always takes care of herself. But that doesn't answer the future like I'd like it to be answered.
Mm-hmm. On the other hand, we got to be honest too. You have thousands of people traveling to Santa Rosa to the McDougall program from all over the world, including me, right?
Yeah,
So that happened. That happened, right? Some people showed up. Some people did, line up in front of your doors. So.
No, they did. And that's another thing I'll just tell you. And I don't know how to say these things without coming off with an attitude other than I'm trying to share with you. Mm-hmm. And that is, I would come home from a radio or a television show. Like I remember one night I came home from the Larry King show. My dad went with me to Bethesda, Maryland, to do the Larry King show, the radio show one night. And I came home afterwards. He went with me. And I said, Dad, I'm really not doing anything. I'm accomplishing nothing. Although we sold 200,000 books in 1 hour or 2 hours. I just feel like I'm making no progress. He says, son, you have no idea of the changes that you have, helped start and propagate. And I can tell you, that was probably 30, 40 years ago that we had that discussion. And here I am 30, 40 years later. Now I can see where the efforts that Mary and I have made a difference. Hopefully influenced you, and I know a lot of the other doctors out there, really point to the work that we've done as being pivotal. And I don't want you to think it was original, because it wasn't, but it was pivotal in terms of collecting information from my mentors, who had discovered that diet is the cause of most of our illnesses, and the right diet, which is a starch-based diet based on rice, corn, potatoes, etc., will cure a good share of the illnesses. I didn't discover this, but I certainly was a tool, along with my wife Mary, partner Mary, in helping put together all their thoughts and communicate in a way that seemed very palatable to a lot of people, those who were willing to listen. It's very simple. I can describe the McDougall program in 2 sentences. The McDougall program is a diet. The McDougall diet is based on starches, vegetables, and fruits. The McDougall diet does not contain any animal products or free oils. That's it, period. Free oils being like olive oil, corn oil, safflower oil. The truth is simple and easy to understand. 90% of your diet should come from starches, rice, corn, potatoes, breads, etc.
Mm-hmm. Which is a wonderful.
People have traditionally eaten, Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I heard again last night, I was watching TV. I used to say 10 billion people walk this earth. A professor corrected me and said 100 billion. Mm-hmm. I heard last night at the statistic, it was 100 billion people walk this earth. But 99.9999% of them ate a diet based on plants. Starches. Because you have to have starch to get the energy. You can't live on leaves like lettuce or broccoli. You have to have the starchy foods like grains and legumes and root vegetables.
Well, you could live off broccoli if you're willing to eat 5.7 kilos a day, right? Then you could do it.
I don't know how well you do. The human being is amazing in its ability to survive. I joke with people. I tell them I've tested it. I've been around for 72 years, and I've tested it. And I can assure you the human body will put up with 2 packs of cigarettes a day, a half a bottle of whiskey a day, and hot dogs wrapped in bacon a day, all day long. Believe me, I've tested it. But the price to be paid is great for those kinds of behaviors.
Before I go back to the question for students, you always mention your mentors, Dr. Kempner, Dr. Swank, Nathan Pritikin, Dr. Dennis Burkett, and then you had this huge treasure of knowledge in your basement from these researchers like 100 years ago. So for all these people who discovered this too, or at least partially discovered the truth, they must have felt the same as you did, right? Can you talk about it? I mean, you must have had conversations with like-minded people, and they also were like helpless, no? Or how was that?
Well, it was, Dennis Burkitt. He was a surgeon trained in Edinburgh, Scotland, who went to
the Fiberman.
Fiberman, right? He went to Scotland, served as the head of Ministries of Health for 17 years, taking care of 10 million people, overseeing over 1,000 hospitals. So, he came back with a very positive attitude because he didn't see any heart disease, obesity, hemorrhoids, common cancers, etc. in Uganda with people on a starch-based diet, corn, etc., root vegetables. So, he came back with a very positive attitude. Well, back then, things were new, and you had every reason to be optimistic that people would, like I did. I thought, all you have to do is tell them the truth. And they just come running to your door for more truth. Well, I've grown up a lot since then.
Okay.
And Nathan Pritikin, he also had a very positive attitude about things. Even though he would be challenged and had a lot of very painful experiences with the low carbers like Atkins, Nathan Pritikin was a very positive man. Roy Swank, likewise. When I first went to the neurology department at Oregon Health and Science University back, I think it was probably 2008. I'm not sure when it started. I first went there, and the neurology department would talk about Dr. Swank. This is a guy who published 176 papers. He was the head of neurology at OHSU, Oregon Health and Science University, for 23 years. When I would walk through those halls and I'd mention the name Swank, they would follow with the word quack.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah. And I thought, you guys, what are you talking about? Well, we did this study, which we published in MS and related disorders, on people with MS and diet. It had some very positive results. And they don't talk that way anymore at OHSU. The neurology department knows you can stop this disease. But I have to tell you, quite honestly, I visited them about a year and a half ago, and they're still pushing drugs. And the drugs cost $150,000 a year. Just for the drug. So the amount of money spent that we did on it, that I gathered and spent on doing our research on diet and multiple sclerosis, is equal to the amount of money taking care of one patient with MS for 5 years. And there are, tens of thousands of people that have this terrible disease. Now more than 100,000. So, it's all economics. When you could, if you watch, like you watch CNN or any of the cable news networks, you'll see that they advertise primarily drugs. And drugs that you wouldn't even imagine people would be advertised, like drugs for psoriasis and Crohn's disease. This used to be a small segment of the population, and the drugs available were relatively unprofitable. Now they have these drugs that cost $40, $50, $60, $100,000 a year to treat these once relatively rare diseases. Now I realize that they're more common now because more people are eating the American diet, but still, when I watch them, focus their advertising dollars on a few orphan drugs. No, orphan drugs is not the right term, but on a few drugs for a few people, there must be a tremendous amount of money in them. No, there is.
So,
medicine is, as far as I can see, is past any real breakthroughs like penicillin or Viagra. We're going to have to deal with the basics if we're really going to see some major improvements in human health. And of course, I've touched on the planet, which is really all I care about anymore.
But this helplessness in bringing the message across was experienced by your mentors too. Then
it was. I don't know. They didn't have to deal with as massive a problem. Back then, only 17% of the Americans were obese.
Okay.
Now we have 40% being obese, and soon they expect 70% to be obese. I'm not saying overweight. I'm talking about obese. So it wasn't as major a problem. Plus, nobody had even thought about the effect of diet on our climate. But barely in the 1970s. They were just starting to think of the possibility that what we were doing in terms of our industrial might was hurting our future, to the point of planetary extinction. Don't kid yourself, folks. We're dealing with an emergency that's likely to result in planetary extinction. Everybody says so. That's in the loop, except for some pretty, I'm not going to mention any names. But there are a few people out there that are still buried with their head in the sand. Pretty much every scientist, every well-read person understands that we really need to react with an all-out effort. It was described to me the first time I learned about climate change by Thomas Friedman in his book about the hot planet in 2008. He said that it would cost as much as it cost to do the Manhattan Project, which was to build the 2 bombs. Is that right? No, the Manhattan Project, right? To build the 2 atomic bombs, which was, $30 billion or something. And he said we could never afford that to solve climate change. And then now they talk about it would cost as much as the Marshall Plan, which was the 4 years of effort post-World War II in Europe, primarily. And that was like $130 billion. Oh, good grief. I mean, we're talking about 44 trillion or $100 trillion to fix the planet. But if you don't, it's just like when I gave that talk to the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, and I explained to them, I think when my last sentence was something to the effect like, what else matters? And a doctor came up to me afterwards and said, I can't see putting all this time into training when I'll be practicing on a dead planet. And I said, yeah, I mean, there's really nothing else that counts. We have a few politicians here in the US who are standing up and saying, climate, that's really my total primary focus of attention if I get elected. And that's the person that's getting my vote, because nothing else counts. Pretty much regardless of whatever else they stand for, anybody who stands up and leads this world out of the path that's going on has got my vote and my support. Unfortunately, like I said, nobody will talk about food. Even Greta Thunberg, the little 16-year-old girl who has made probably more progress in this awareness of what we're doing than anybody else. She doesn't talk about diet. She's a vegan. Her mom's 90% vegan. Her dad's 100% vegan. But I haven't heard her put any effort, certainly any deserved effort, into the issues of diet. And I understand diet is just too personal. But excuse me, it's the card we have to play. Anyway. So, we've been talking for many years, you and I have, and I've been, of course, doing this for many decades. I don't find it challenging anymore to take and cure problems like terrible heart disease or, horrible bowel problems, autoimmune disease. That's something that was reported long before I was in the practice of medicine, something I did a lot of writing on and consolidating information on, and certainly have practiced and made other doctors aware of. But that doesn't interest me anymore.
Okay. No.
There are thousands of other doctors. I have another doctor who works for me at the clinic. I always attend my clinics.
Dr. Lim?
Yeah, Dr. Lim. He takes care of the patients. He loves it. I mean, he tells me that every day, he just can't believe it, that he gets to go to work and have this much fun. And he's not exaggerating. I know I felt the same way about all the people that I've seen, because I could hardly wait to see the next patient. They were so exciting. The challenges, the problems, the the things that would hinder them from making dietary changes. Every patient was fun for me. And Dr. Lim feels the same way. And other doctors who have worked with us. We have about 7 physicians who worked at our clinic.
Okay.
But Dr. Lim's our main medical director.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw him. Great. Yeah, you can tell he loves what he does on stage. Well, absolutely.
He really, that's the important thing. And that's what I enjoy most hearing from his, is he'll go back and he'll tell you the stories about before we met, which was 3 years ago, how he wasn't quite sure he really wanted to be a doctor. He wasn't quite sure about anything. He just couldn't see any purpose. And I know that feeling. And I couldn't see any purpose before I discovered the connection between diet and disease back in the mid and late 1970s. I really didn't like being a doctor because I couldn't see myself really helping people. And many doctors have come to me and they've said, excuse me, to our training program, they've said, I was going to quit medicine. I was going to become a carpenter or whatever. I just had to get out. And then I discovered this, and I can hardly wait to go to work the next day. We had a resident that was signed up for an anesthesiology residency, and this is a firm commitment. And she went through our program as a training student, and she got out of her anesthesiology and went into general medicine. We have that happen all the time with students who come to us. They come with the attitude, that there's something seriously missing. That's causing me to not like being a doctor. And that what's missing is success. Because you're not dealing with the problem. The problem's the food.
Speaking of students, please, Dr. McDougall, that would be the question, the last one. Speaking of students, let's say you have a student or several, they know this, they learned all about this, the options, the real options, the good solutions, the valuable information, and they decide something completely crazy. Like they say, okay, I know this now I want to get a degree to apply this, right? Like, something reasonable to do, actually. So they go to school and they, keep quiet. They go sort of undercover, right?
Yeah.
Go through, and then they have to write a thesis. So what would you say if a student would have the idea? I mean, you got to have something. If you go 5 years to school, as an adult, you got to have something. Let's say somebody would decide to write a thesis about the starch solution. What would you say to that?
I would be careful. I would be careful not to challenge people. Things are a lot different now than they were when I was a student, which was half a century ago. Just to give you the quick summary, I was almost thrown out of medical school twice and thrown out of residency twice. They had big meetings about me because I would challenge them all the time. And they didn't like to be challenged. And I always tell students, I say, when you go back, don't mention anything until you graduate. And then once you graduate and have your degree, you can do whatever you want. Because, they have life and death power over you when you're in school. But once you become a licensed doctor, physician, or dietitian, et cetera, you've got a ticket they can't really take away from you. You've earned that degree. They can go after you and try and hurt you, but not like they would a student. I almost ended my career 4 times, or at least twice when I was in medical school. Fortunately, I had somebody who was very much in my corner.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'm.
So
all I did was challenge them. I just challenged them about, well, why isn't it this way? And they didn't want to be challenged.
So if somebody, you got to have some, wiggle room to do a little bit of something that is fun, a little bit, like writing a paper about, I don't know, if somebody would decide to go that route. Yeah. Would there be some tips to do that? Okay, you can do it, but at least, consider this and that. Would you have something?
Well, I would certainly check with my faculty to make sure this is something they're interested in, or with this worthwhile project. We've had one resident that was not given credit in all the time we've been taking students. And no matter how much I pleaded with their residency program and tried to explain to them that we were practicing standard medicine, but of a higher quality, credit. But otherwise, most medical schools recognize what we're doing. Training recognize it. So things are a little different nowadays. I don't know what you can get away with, so I'd still be careful. Because they're very hard to deal with.
Okay, maybe at least, as you said, talk to the faculty, talk to the teacher. Could I do this? Could I do that? Something like this.
And will you defend me when I make a few other people mad?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's good advice. Thanks a lot.
You're talking about people's dinner plates.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. Is your own food is so personal. You know, when we talk about, you know, people just have these barriers. And I remember when I changed my diet, I didn't think I was going to survive without the meat. But you know, I got over that a long time ago.
I understand.
One of the other interesting things that I've learned recently that was kind of eye-opening is I learned that India was one of the most climate damaging countries in the world. And I said, but they're all vegetarians, or at least a segment of the population is. And they said the reason they're so damaging is because, you know, they produce all these dairy products.
Okay.
And the cows live to be 30 years old.
Okay.
And so you just got all these cows around in India. You know, more cows than I guess it looked like from the map I saw, more cows than any place else in the world. You know, all polluted. So India is a very, very high source of pollution. US is China, Russia. You know, it's terrible.
Dr. McDougall, amazing talk. We're now at an hour.
Right. Good. Well, it's nice to talk to you as always. I hope you're making some progress in your homeland.
Yeah,
I understand that well, I don't know what I understand anymore. You know, I really hate to come to any conclusions, because the day I do, everything changes tomorrow. It's an amazing world we live in. A little scary.
Yeah, well, thanks again, Dr. McDougall, for everything you did and do for this interview. At the 3-day intensives this year, is there two again, September 2?
Yes,
because that was not sure.
No, we're going to have one I think in May and one in September.
March and September, I believe.
Right. Then we run 10-day medical-based programs, almost a month. And then we take care of some big companies like Whole Foods and a telecommunication company called CenturyLink here in the U.S. So we take care of employees of companies too. They do that because when they look at the bottom line, they go, whoa, medical expenses have been cut drastically. Like Forbes magazine reported on the results of our work with New Century, or CenturyLink. CenturyLink is the name of the company. And Forbes magazine reported a 34% reduction in healthcare costs. Yeah. And that spreads not just the people who come to our program. This spreads throughout the business. You know, so that's where I think we should be making our greatest progress, is in businesses that, you know, are really concerned about that bottom line. And a few percentage points in terms of decreased medical care costs could meet the difference between staying alive and going bankrupt.
Yeah.
So, anyway, we've gathered some attention in this industry too.
Wonderful. Yeah, wonderful. Thanks a lot, Dr. McDougall.
Pleasure.
Happy New Year in a few days to you and your family.
Let's hope 2020 is a great year, and that we all change in a very positive direction.
Yes, that would be wonderful.
Because,
All right, I hope I see you again.
And see how things go.
All right. Thanks a lot again. Enjoy your day in Oregon, and see you soon, Dr. McDougall. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for the opportunity to share.
Always.
All
Goodbye, doctor.
Bye-bye.